Welcome to the Bergstrom Bunch podcast. I'm Jason.
And I'm Kathy.
And today we're going to talk about love. And love is fun.
But it's also a choice.
It is a choice.
And a lot of work.
So that's what we're going to talk about. I want to take us back 30 years, almost 30 years to when we started dating. I was 16 years old.
And I was 21. Quite a scandal.
Yes, so your mom had invited you to my dad's birthday party. That was the context.
Yep.
Which was also Easter Sunday.
Yes.
And we chatted a little bit at the party.
A lot of it
at the party. And then you invited me to an Easter play, a celebration at a church.
That's because if we're talking about love, so love can also be attraction. And you were a cutie.
Oh, thank you.
You're still a cutie, but you were a cutie. Yeah.
And I was very drawn to you as well. And but I because you were older than I wasn't really thinking about relationship. A little bit older.
A lot of bit older.
But I was more than happy to go to the Easter play, resurrection play at the church. And so, you drove. I didn't have a car. So.
Do we need to get into all of that?
So anyway, we went to the play, and I don't know, we just we started chatting a little bit more, and then we found another thing to go to the next week.
Yeah.
And a lot of church events. We went to a lot of church events.
So I will say, though, as much as I was attracted to you, you were much younger than me, which was a challenge for me because I had never dated anybody younger. And in all fairness, I never wanted to date anyone younger, and that was kind of a scandalous thing for me. But what really drew you, or me to you, was just the fact that you were so solid in who you were and your values, and that you had a sense of purpose in who you were, and the way you responded to me as far as like the strength that you showed me, and the way you dated me was very different than anybody else I had ever dated. There were standards, there were boundaries, there was a sense of, okay, we're not just dating to have a good time, we're dating because we have a purpose in the future. And so that kind of love is very different than the kind of love that you see elsewhere.
Yeah, and you were energetic, this kind of dynamic force. I'm pretty even keel. I like adventure, but in terms of being the life of the party, that wasn't me, but that was you. And so you brought a lot of fun into the equation.
Because I was a wild child before I met you, for sure. So maybe we should go into that a little bit. Our backdrops are very different. Yeah. So let's talk about yours first, because mine's a little bit more scandalous than yours. I grew up in the church. My dad's a pastor, and for the most part, I walked a straight and narrow line. So, Straight and narrow line. I did not know what that was before I met you, honestly. So my backdrop, as you well know, I was a wild child. I had been around the block and back, so to speak. But when I met you, I had a child as well. So aside from being a wild child, I also had one when you and I met.
Brittany was 2 years old.
Yeah, she was. And she was a wild one at that juncture. Yeah. And so so with that, I guess when I think about our past together, my reputation in your dad's church was a little bit scandalous, because my mom would go to your dad's church and be like, pray for my daughter, Kathy. She's clubbing and doing this and that. And you had never dated anyone. So when you and I got together, everybody in the church was kind of freaking out because they didn't think that I was the type of person that God would bring into your life. And yet, I think attraction has something to do with falling in love, but then love goes beyond that attraction. So I think you have a little bit of more of a story there even than me, because I was a lot of work.
Yeah, thinking of the church people, they were concerned, as very understandable. They expressed their concerns to us. Our parents were concerned, and unlike a lot of relationships, we knew that it couldn't just be an experimental thing. It couldn't be just,
Oh yeah, so talk about when your parents wanted to get together with my parents and
that happened
have
shortly after. They
and
invited
have a
your
meeting.
parents over for dessert, and my siblings, it cleared out. They knew what was going on, and so it's the six of us
and
sitting
they wanted
around
to talk
having
about
the,
our relationship because
intervention chat.
Yeah. Well, and in large part that was because I had a child, and so they wanted to make sure that you knew what you were getting yourself into as far as the commitment, and that I had a responsibility to bring my daughter into this situation, which we hadn't yet.
Well, we knew early on we had to know if this was a relationship that was going to last or not. And so early on we had to really pray and decide, is this going to be a forever thing? Because Brittany was a big factor. I mean, both of us could handle being in a relationship that didn't last. It would hurt, but we'd deal with it. But a 2-year-old,
Yeah.
and being a father figure in her life, I didn't want her to get attached to me, and then for us to decide, no, this isn't working out.
And you were 16 years old at the time. So this is, I guess, where we get into when love becomes work, because you can be attracted, fall in love, but then at some point in time, love does become work.
Yeah.
Love is demonstrated through action. It's not just a feel-good fuzzy.
Well, we had to make that choice. Are we going to commit to this? Are we going to, despite challenges and people that think we're doing the wrong thing, is this something we're going to commit to? Because I didn't want to see, of course, we didn't want to be hurt ourselves, but I knew how tragic that would be for Brittany to get attached, and then for me to be gone, and then what does that mean for her?
Yep.
And so we had to make a choice. Is this something? Are we doing this? Is this God's will? And it forced us to pray a lot and to really seek God and to understand either we're going to go forward with this or not. And so I think very early on in our relationship, we really felt like this was going to head towards marriage.
Yeah. Well, and so when you make a commitment, that's where love, again, going back to, it's not a feel-good fuzzy. It does become work. You have to be intentional. You have to demonstrate your love through actions. And you did a lot of that for me and for Brittany. That's why I say I was high maintenance, because I came to you with a whole lot of backdrop that you didn't have. A lot of hurt, a lot of pain, a lot of things that I had to work through. And then you were really strong for me during that time, which is, a lot of people are like, oh, you were 21, he was 16. I'm like, he was not your normal 16-year-old. And you were very mature for your age. You just had a lot of responsibility in your own right, as far as your sense of responsibility, but also what you took on. Your dad entrusted certain things to you at the church, and your dad trusted you when you decided that you wanted to date me, even though they were looking at me like, okay. They knew my backdrop, and they weren't sure that that's what they wanted for their son, but they entrusted you to determine what was best for you. And so I think you should share a little bit about what you did to demonstrate love to Brittany when she was little. Because again, going back to like the idea that love is demonstrated through action, and it really is a choice that we make. There's not always necessarily affection initially. I mean, having adopted kids ourselves, this is kind of a precursor to that. Most people don't realize that you actually adopted Brittany. And initially, when you have somebody that comes into your life that's not your biological child, there's a relationship that has to be formed initially before there's that affection that develops. And so I think you really should share a little bit about that.
It started off with that relationship building, whether time at the park or, the slides, the swings, the just time together, and finding adventure
the reason
together,
I want you to share about that is because Brittany multiple times has said, Mom, he married me, or he married you because of me. So she was convinced that it was because you fell in love with her and not me that you married me.
Well, as challenging as it was fun raising a 2-year-old, and she was wild. She would go into the fridge, into the country crock, and just backhoe with her fingers a scoop of margarine. And she liked to set her own rules. If you told her to sit down and eat and she wanted to get up and run, she'd get up and run. And so I had to walk this balance of, I'm building this relationship, but I also have to bring discipline into her life. And she would, at a stoplight, she's known to toss her toys out the window. And
that was when she was with me. I don't know if she ever did that with you, but that was when she was with me.
Well, it was one drive with her when she refused to stay in her car seat. And it was a booster seat. The laws were a little different then, but she kept climbing out of the booster seat. And I told her she had to stay in there, and she did not listen. It was just her and I in the car. And so I had to pull over and deal with some things and to show her that it wasn't going to work. And you got to listen. You have to obey. And so it was a challenge to learn how to parent this child who already had values instilled and her own way of doing things. And I had to establish myself as, okay, more than friend or mom's boyfriend, but the authority figure in her life.
Yeah, but I mean, what I saw, you were very affectionate with her, and even at that juncture before we got married, she knew you as Daddy Jason.
Yeah.
And at one point in time, we were dating a year, and then sorry, Brittany's distracting me. We were dating a year, and then you moved away to San Diego. And so we had this long distance relationship. And
this was before FaceTime, before email, before texting.
Yeah, before cell phones. We didn't even have cell phones. Everything was long distance.
And it was expensive. And so we'd have to we'd had calling cards. We'd use that to make the call. And it wasn't a daily thing. We couldn't afford to call each other daily. And so we wrote a lot of letters. And
yeah. Well, there are so many people out there that fall in love with someone that already has a child. And usually they're in their 20s or their 30s. You were 16 years old and you met someone who already had a child. And so for you, that was very different. You hadn't even lived the bulk of your life yet.
Yeah.
And so I do remember when we were dating that there were some that were very concerned that you were kind of giving up your life too early or giving up your experiences too early because you were dating somebody that had a child. So once we got married, boom, right out of the gates, you have a child. And there are so many people out there that are stepping into situations where they're dating someone that already has children. And I do think it's important to, I guess, emphasize that falling in love with the person also means then that you need to choose to love whoever's coming with them and how that looks. So for you, I guess, going back to the fact that you lived in San Diego while I lived in San Jose for a time, and how you intentionally demonstrated to Brittany that, hey, I love you and you're mine, basically.
Yeah. Well, part of that was when you would put her on the phone, but, in part of our letter writing, I would include a letter to Brittany and draw pictures of usually Aladdin and Jasmine. That was kind of her thing. And I had read her the Aladdin book enough times.
I think she said,
didn't
she sing that song for you?
She did. You sent me a cassette of Brittany singing. Yeah. And so
of a whole new world. She sang the whole song.
Yeah.
In a bull sights. Yeah.
Yep. But I would. I also recorded a cassette of reading books, stories that we had read that I sent back up, and so keeping that. But again, love then becomes work because you can't go into cruise control when you live an 8-hour drive apart. And so every 3-day weekend, usually about once a month, one of us would make that drive. And many a times it was after a wrestling meet or track meet, and jump in my little Ford Escort and put in my mixtape and bring a sibling along to keep me awake and make the trek. And so it was, you get a day and a half and you get to turn around and head home. And so, it's work. Took all the bit of money I had for gas. So it was a whole $1.10 a gallon back then. So
Yeah. No, and we both were making that drive at least once a month.
Yeah.
And so that's how often we would see each other. Now, I mean, my kids, they all have FaceTime.
It's
So,
easy now.
oh my goodness. So they can talk to their person every single day. But yeah, for you and I, it was a little bit more challenging. But I guess that's where thinking about Valentine's Day and everybody, the month of February is like the love month. And I think a lot of people, when they think about love, it is that feel good fuzzy versus, what happens when that feel good fuzzy ends and it actually is work.
Yeah, because the truth is, not every day feels like a loving day. And not every day feels awesome because we're human, and there's times when we're hurt by each other's actions or lack of words. And I think of a very familiar passage in 1 Corinthians 13 where the Apostle Paul wrote, "Love is patient, love is kind, it does not envy, it does not boast, it is not proud, it does not dishonor others, it is not self-seeking, it is not easily angered, it keeps no record of wrongs. Love does not delight in evil, but rejoices with the truth. It always protects, always trusts, always hopes, always perseveres." And the thing about those qualities is none of them come naturally.
No, none of them are emotional. It's all work. I mean, love is patient. Okay, I'm not the most patient person. Love is kind. And I think, so as I think about those things, I've tried to be intentional in that. Even when I go other places, and this is outside of our relationship, when I go places, I always try to think through like, okay, if love is kind, how am I showing kindness to people, and thinking about those attributes which do not come natural to us. Those are things that we actually have to intentionally work on. And those are things that we're like, oh, somebody just cut me off, and then you have to decide, okay, I'm not going to be that person. I'm not going to respond in that manner. And in whatever setting we're in, even having the business that we have, there are people that come in that can be a little bit difficult, challenging, and then you think through like, how do I respond? And really, if we think about that, love is the greatest attribute we can possess. The definition of love gets so skewed, and I think we forget that love is not just something you feel. It's more so actually something you do. It's an action. You demonstrate, hey, I care about you through the actions that you portray.
Yeah. Well, and I would think that most people's hurt in their life has to do with someone who was supposed to love them, but when the feeling was gone, they didn't follow through with the choice. They didn't make a choice to always protect. They didn't make a choice to be one who doesn't keep a record of wrongs. They envied, and so whether that's from a parent or a spouse or a dating relationship, someone that, hey, you said you love me, you've communicated you love me, we had this connection, we felt this for each other, but when it came down to it, you weren't who I needed you to be. And so that's where most people's deepest hurts lie, is from someone who was supposed to love them but didn't do the work, didn't step up to be that person that they needed them to be.
Yeah, and I think certainly before I met you, for me, because of where I came from, my way of showing my daughter love was, oh, you want chicken nuggets? You get chicken nuggets. You want to eat that margarine? You eat that margarine. You want to rule the show? You rule the show. She still kind of rules the show. She's still kind of that person. Anyway, which we love her for that. But she's strong in her own person at this juncture. It's not because she was spoiled, it's because she knows who she is. But when she was little, it's like, yeah, whatever she wanted, mom gave her. And that was my way of showing her love. So when you stepped into the picture, your definition of love was, okay, certain things I'm going to allow, but other things, there are boundaries, there are standards. We need to have a foundation that your life is going to be able to be stabilized by. And I think that's where oftentimes when we think about love, we don't think about the idea that our version of love needs to be something that somebody else can step into and be stabilized by.
Yeah. Well, it's when you love someone, you want the best for them. And I think of when Brittany was in that margarine eating phase, and there,
Sorry, Brittany. Sorry, Brittany. You're being thrown on the coals right now.
But your parents had made, I don't know, pasta and salad for dinner. I remember there was salad, and Brittany had her own little table and chairs. And so when I would come over to your house, I would be part of the family dinners. But I had told Brittany that she couldn't get up from the table till she finished her salad, which was a tiny salad.
There were multiple times you told her she could not get up until she finished her vegetables.
Well, I just remember that was a challenge. It was probably a couple hours.
I think that was probably the initiation of her becoming a chipmunk. Didn't she store her stuff and she would not swallow it?
Oh yeah, but she wiggled so much she'd just fall out of her little chair and just no, you have. And so it was that. Here's that power struggle. I said, you're going to stay there until it's done. And she wanted to do what she always did, get up and run. And I had to stick to my guns. And that's part of love. You see something better in someone, and you have to push them towards that. And so that's the difficult part. It's just easier to let someone do what they want or act how we feel rather than make a choice to, hey, let's bring some action to this.
Yeah, no, and I absolutely, and there was so much that I didn't grow up with, but finally when I got to that place where it's okay, I'm going to give my life to Christ, and I have these new values now that I realized I need to love people in such a way, and especially my children in such a way that I care about their mental, emotional, and spiritual health. That, there's a whole package there, and if you neglect one of those, then you're not really loving people. You're enabling them in certain areas. Maybe you're enabling them to be successful based upon the world's definition of success, which is always changing. Or you're enabling them to be mentally healthy based upon society's definition of mental health. Or you're enabling them to be emotionally healthy based on society's definition of emotional health, when in reality, there's a foundation that can be laid that is a groundwork for all of that. And then spiritually healthy, it's dabble in this, dabble in that, dabble. And I did a lot of dabbling over the years, which led me to your front door, basically, as far as where you were at, not looking for religion by any means, but looking for something that was bigger than myself, that I could actually feel okay, there's a relationship here, and there's a man in my life I could finally trust. And that's where I would say you were not the first. You know that. You were not the first man that I could finally trust. It was Jesus that was the first man I could trust, which is why I opened my heart to be able to trust you. And so I think that until you really know the full definition of love, or you're grounded in what that definition looks like, it's really hard to love other people, because love is really based on behavior. It's based on somebody else's behavior. It's based upon how you feel. It's based upon what you want to do versus maybe God compelling you to love people that you would otherwise not love. That's where for me, especially thinking about Valentine's Day and the idea of love, I always go back to Jesus makes me care about the things I would otherwise not care about. He makes me love maybe those who I wouldn't otherwise love, the unlovable. I adopted a lot of kids, not because I needed more kids, but because of the love of Jesus and what he gave us. And he's I want you to extend that love to others and bring them into your home and make them part of your family and provide for them what you've provided for the kids that you already have. And so for you though, it was such a different journey, and yet similar. When we adopted kids, it was almost like God was preparing you for that journey.
Yeah. Well, when you look at it at its core, love comes with sacrifice, because there's things you want to do. There's ways you would react, and even in a marriage, there's maybe music you'd rather listen to, or something you'd rather have for dinner, but there's sacrifice.
Oh, and I know when you fell in love with me, there was a lot of sacrifice. I mean, I still remember like those early years, us being in church together, and because we came from such different backdrops, and you had never dated anyone, and I, I still remember being in church, and I would sit next to you and drape my leg over yours, and there were like church women that were like, "What?" and then one of them actually gave us a book.
Yeah.
That was Givers, Takers, and Other Kinds of Lovers.
Good book.
Yeah, it is a good book. But I mean, I was cracking up. Like, they saw my leg draped over you, and they decided to give us this book. Okay, fun. And then, I mean, even just all the things that were stated, because again, you were the pastor's son, and so I was that wild one that was brought into your life, and yet your choice as far as loving me and investing in me, that was something that you had to make a decision for yourself and not listen to all the criticism. And even your parents had a lot of people speaking into their ears at the same time, and yet they entrusted you with the choice. And so for you, there was a lot that I shared with you, early on, because I was going through so much, and there was a lot that I unloaded on you. So I don't know. I kind of feel like maybe you share about some of that to an extent, because you didn't come from a certain backdrop, but I did. But then you were able, my heart was broken, and you were so strong in who you were that you were able to kind of help my heart heal.
Yeah. Well, yeah, you definitely shared some things that were outside of my realm of experience, and I had to decide: is this someone that I can overlook things of the past? Is this someone that I can forgive? But more than that, even as we started thinking about marriage, I just started thinking for myself: do I really love her? Like, what if she was in a car accident and lost her legs, and I had to push her around in a wheelchair for the rest of her life? Would I still marry her? What if she had cancer? What if she had 4 years to live? What if she was burned by acid and have her face melted? Would I still marry her? And I remember just thinking through that, as that's how I know if I love someone, is if external beauty is gone, would I still make that sacrifice? Would I still make that choice? Do I love her heart? Do I love her for who she is rather than for how she looks? And so before, this was early on, just deciding, okay, do I really love? Because when it comes down to it, am I going to be willing to make the sacrifices necessary?
And you were willing, and I'm so thankful.
And I was willing. Yeah. And I'm glad that half of your face is not burned by acid.
I am too. Yes. But I'm thankful to know that if that ever happened, you would still
be
love
around.
me. Anyway, this has been fantastic spending time with you, baby.
Yes, indeed.
So,
I think if we could just sum up one thing, as people are maybe in a relationship, and just that understanding that feelings come and go, and there's days when you disagree, there's days when you're hurt by someone, there's days when you don't feel like remaining in their presence or relationship, and you've got to come back to, look, we made a choice, we made a commitment. For us, we stood before God and our family and friends, and we said, I do, till death do we part. And it's that choice, and it's a daily choice to, hey, I've got to lay down some of my wants, my desires, my hopes, my dreams, because we're pursuing something greater.
yeah. And I guess I think that to sum up what we've even been talking about is that basically love is demonstrated by your actions. So how you listen, how you care, how you set boundaries, all of that speaks love. And if we're not demonstrating our love by our actions, then are we really loving? If it's just based on a feel good fuzzy, I mean, like, that's fleeting. But genuine love is always something that we can do even if we don't feel like doing it.
Yeah. And the good news is feelings often follow actions.
That's what I appreciate about you. You love me even if I'm that person.
I do love All right. Well, we appreciate everyone listening in, and we hope this has been helpful. And as always, we love to hear your feedback. So we look forward to having you join us again real soon.